Welcome to Eye on Horror, the official podcast of iHorror.com. This is episode 141, otherwise known as Season 8, Episode 1. Yay! I am your host, James J. Edwards, and with me, as always, is your other host, Jacob Davidson. How you doing, Jacob?
Doing okay. I can't believe we're kicking off a new season in a new year.
Oh, 8 seasons. And considering we do it, every year, this is our 8th year. Woohoo! Also with us, as always, is your other host, John Correa. How you doing, Correa?
It's a new year, new season, same bastard.
Same 3 liberal left grifters.
Yeah.
Before we get started here, we have to say yesterday, David Lynch passed away. So we definitely need to acknowledge him. We should probably do like an actual episode of Lynch at some point. But just for now, to acknowledge his passing, what's your favorite Lynch movie? Mine's Wild at Heart.
Mine's Mulholland Drive, although I also really do love Eraserhead, which was the first movie of his which I saw back in high school at the Coolidge Corner Theater. And I also want to say David Lynch was such a presence that him being gone, it does feel like a fundamental shift in the world.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'd have to say I'm going to be that guy. His short films and weather reports. That was I
Weather
watched.
Reports, yeah.
I loved his weather reports in college. I watched them all the time. And yeah, there was something so weird and strange about them, but also uplifting. Just, I mean, yeah, he was just such a funny guy, so quotable. Yeah. So many people were sharing that one weather report of him wearing sunglasses, and he's like, I'm wearing shades because I saw the future and it's looking bright. It's like,
I just love the interview he gave. Someone asked him, or he said, Eraserhead's my most spiritual movie. And the reporter's like, can you elaborate on that? And he's all, no. Love it. Yeah, for me, the 3 Davids, Cronenberg, Fincher, and Lynch. And one of them's gone. But
yeah.
We'll do a whole episode or something about him later. But for now, let's hop into what's new. I know that at least Jacob and I have seen Wolfman, which is the big new release this week.
Oh, sorry. Some of us have just been in a state of mass anxiety for the last week.
Yeah. Some of us have been right smack in the middle of like 4 fires. What did you think of Wolfman, Jacob?
I thought it was pretty good. I liked Lee Winnell's twist on the Wolfman, and I thought it was a unique setup. Also, it's been a while since we had a Universal monster movie, and it did kind of feel more in line with that. Because it's about this guy who lives in the city with his wife and daughter, and like they're writers, and he grew up in this kind of survivalist compound in Oregon, and he finds out his dad died, so they go up to unpack the land, and there is a wolfman.
Most of the movie, I have to say, I really liked it as well. But here's the thing. I had to temper my expectations a little bit because I went into it expecting The Invisible Man, which was incredible. And about a third of the way through it, I was like, okay, this isn't quite an Invisible Man type take. It's a little more standard. But the whole movie essentially takes place in and around this one cabin. So it's a real compact and condensed, movie. But there's an opening scene where his dad, it shows him as a child, and his dad is kind of protecting him from the Wolfman, and that comes back because he's protecting his daughter from it. So there's a lot of like family, not really drama, like the emotional core of the movie is the family. And I thought that the guy's name is Blake and his daughter is Ginger. The relationship between dad and daughter is what really did it for me. But one thing that is amazing about it is the monster. The Wolfman himself is all practical effects, and it kind of harkens back to like The Fly. He's like kind of like oozy and gooey, and they show the transformation is like slow, but they also show it from his point of view. Like there's like one point where like the camera will like change to like will like kind of like dolly to behind him, and all of a sudden he can't understand what people are saying, or the lighting is different, and all of a sudden it's not like kind of turns black and white. It's really interesting the way that they deal with the transformations. But
And being Lee Winnell, that also has a lot of other subtext, like deals with kind of the cycle of abuse because Blake's father uh, was kind of abusive, and he's got his own anger problems with his wife and daughter that he's trying to hold back. So it just kind of ties in together.
yeah, it kind of goes into that, where because his dad, what you could tell his dad's heart was in the right place, but he was like a disciplinarian, and sometimes that would boil over in Blake. But yeah, it is it's not quite, there's not quite as much subtext as the Invisible Man. I mean, the Invisible Man I think is a masterpiece.
Oh yeah,
So
love the Invisible Man.
it's not quite, you have to temper your expectations, but this is not just another January dump movie. It's way better than that. And there may be a little bit of CG with the werewolf movements, because they do some like weird, like crawling around. And there's one that's definitely CG because it has to do with a missing limb. But most of the creature makeup is actually practical.
Yeah, no, I do like how they were able to kind of blend that. Also, I had never seen the original Wolfman movie before with Lon Chaney Jr., and I watched it after seeing the remake, and it is actually interesting because I feel like there were some direct connections and homages to it, like the whole bear trap thing. Like the wolf in both movies, the Wolfman gets hit by a bear trap, and I do feel like there are some parallels. But also, the original Wolfman is really good. Again, I'd never seen it before, but yeah, it just. Yeah, no, it's the lead in the remake. Who was the actor again?
The actor's Christopher Abbott.
Yeah, Christopher Abbott. And
He's the
Lon
guy who
Chaney.
played Christopher Abbott played the foreigner in Craven the Hunter. Remember, I was talking about that weird villain that I had never seen before. It's the same actor as Wolfman.
Well, him and Lon Chaney Jr. They do such a good job at creating empathy for their characters, especially as they're turning into the Wolfman, becoming a threat to their friends and family.
I've gone on record before, and I'll say it again. All of the Universal monsters, with the exception of the Invisible Man, are all pretty sympathetic characters, and the Wolfman is one of the more sympathetic because he doesn't want to change. I actually watched the original Wolfman the night before I saw Wolfman, so it was fresh in my mind too. And one thing that I don't remember is what a creep Larry Talbot is before before he becomes the Wolfman. Like when he's creeping on the woman in that curio shop,
Mm.
You're like, dude, no means no. It's like he would have been Me Too like a mother if that was made today. But yeah, I think the Universal monsters, all of them, Frankenstein, the creature from the Black Lagoon, they're all pretty sympathetic characters. And you're right, Christopher Abbott does do a really good job at projecting that. It's like he knows, he's like this, and they make a big deal of it too. They're like, his, because Julia Garner is the wife, and she's like, I love you, and he's like, all, he can't talk, but they have other ways of communicating, and yeah, you can tell that he doesn't want to do these things that he's doing.
I would argue the original Invisible Man is sympathetic. I
know
mean,
he's not.
No,
He's an
he's a complete
asshole.
psycho.
He's
listen,
an asshole.
he wasn't before the accident though, and also I don't
But
know
he
if it's
revels in being evil. Like he blew up a train.
because of the changes, man. It's all the chemicals and stuff like just unlock that and like cause that. It's like you don't blame someone when they have a brain tumor, when stuff goes bad or concussions and changes behavior. He's the victim of his own thing. Also, I mean, I can relate to just wanting to be left alone to my little project, and everyone just like annoying the shit out of you. Plus, also, he's sassy. I can't be mad at a sassy villain. The whole running through the town in just wearing pants bit is brilliant. Brilliant. No notes.
one of those sketch comedy movies. It might have been either Amazon Women on the Moon or
Amazon
Kentucky.
Women on the Moon. I know what
Was
you're
it?
talking
Yeah.
about.
He's like, ever see a shirt make a telephone call? And the guy's not invisible.
Yeah, no, he's just brain damaged because he was huffing chemicals.
Yeah.
But then he gets naked, starts running around. They're like, oh yeah, he's doing it again.
See, if anyone is not, if any of them are, it's the Hollow Man. The Hollow Man is not
yeah.
redeemable. Kevin Bacon's character was creeping before he turned invisible, and the second he was invisible, he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna do all the creeping," and it's like, bro.
No, it's that and the Invisible Man remake. The guy in that was also a total monster.
They made him, and there was a lot of symbolism in that. I like the gaslighting that. That's an amazing take on it. I mean, and circling back to Wolfman, if you expect that kind of a take, you will be disappointed. But if you it's a great creature feature, and I'm not quite sure why they're doing it in January, because it's not a January dump movie at all. It's way better than that.
Yeah, no, it did feel like a good traditional werewolf movie. And yeah, no, like Jay was saying, just it's very compact because it's just about a family in the wilderness with a werewolf, and the dad gets bitten by a werewolf, so they've got a monster within and without.
Yeah, and sometimes studios do release something where they're like, this is good, but it won't do bangers when it's up against the tent poles and stuff. So let's put it in a month that's known for dumping so that it can, hopefully clean up.
Yep. Have either of you guys seen Red Rooms?
Oh, I did. I saw it last year.
Did you? Oh, that movie was. If I had seen it before we made our top tens, it might have snuck on it. It is.
It fucked me up.
It's but the thing is, it's not the movie I thought that it was going to be. I thought it was going to be more exploitative than it is, because you think Red Rooms, it's about these dark web murder rooms, and it kind of is, but it's more about the trial of this guy who's accused of it, and this woman who kind of becomes obsessed with the trial. So it's more of like a courtroom drama, but it's pretty messed up. It's a pretty messed up movie. Yeah, it's crazy. What did you think of it?
I thought it was great. Like, I thought it was very disturbing, very timely. And I mean, I kind of remember reading, a creepypasta about Red Rooms as actual internet urban legend. But it's interesting to see kind of whole subject on that and kind of tied into, that kind of fanaticism that true crime and murders can have. And yeah, no, it was very, very disturbing. So yeah, no, although very, very well made, I did think it was an incredible and biting horror movie.
Yeah, I think it's on Shudder now.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so it's not what I thought it was going to be, but it's actually better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be something a little more exploitive than it was.
Nice. I haven't watched a whole lot of new stuff. If y'all don't know, Jacob and I are in LA. We're in very different parts of LA, but so we've been safe, but it's been a very anxiety inducing couple of weeks
Korea dropped a map to us of where he is, and he was literally surrounded by like 4 fires. I'm like, why are you still there?
But by a couple of miles. So like it's that catch-22 of like, do you leave now? Do you leave later? If you leave now, are you adding to the congestion for people who are in more immediate need of leaving, and or when is it too late? So like we've been watching that evacuation line very closely.
And how long will it take you to catch your cat to bring him with you?
Not long. He's doopy. I throw a little catnip in the carrier, he'll jump right in. Yeah.
Oh, he's one of those cats. Okay.
Yeah, BP's all right. He's a pain in my ass, but he's my guy. But yeah, so just a lot of comfort watching. I watched all of Abbott Elementary. But as far as newer releases, I did watch the documentary George A. Romero's Resident Evil, which is all about how in the 90s there was a short period where George A. Romero was tapped to do the Resident Evil movie before the Paul W.S. Anderson adaptation was made, and it is an interesting story in the fact that like George A. Romero created the zombie genre, as we all know, being the master. And then this hit video game happens, and it takes such big influence from him. And Capcom actually hired George A. Romero to direct a couple of commercials, live action commercials for Resident Evil 2, which was only released in Japan. And they made a making of. And so it kind of got to that point where it was like, well, it makes sense. Let's have him make the movie. And obviously it never happened. But this documentary is out now, and I gotta say, it made me realize how spoiled, especially horror fans, have been with behind the scenes documentaries, making of documentaries, just like deep dives between, RoboDoc, the Folk Horde one, Unearthed, like all these amazing deep dive documentaries have come out in the last few years that when you get one that's kind of okay, it feels like a huge letdown. That's not to say that this is a bad documentary at all. There's just if you know the story of what happened with George A. Romero's Resident Evil, or you've listened to a podcast about it, you already know everything that this documentary has. They don't really have anyone that was involved with the process. They do interview a few of the game developers of the original Resident Evil games, which was cool. They interview a few people from GARF, the George A. Romero Foundation, to talk, and they spend like the first 25 minutes giving you an overview of like his life and career, which again, if you're a big fan of George A. Romero, you're kind of sitting there being like, yeah, I know this. Yeah, let's get to the Resident Evil bit. And then but yeah, the only person that's close to the actual project that they interview was one of the actors in the Romero commercials. He played one of the zombies. And so his stories were really cool about like, because they shot it in LA. It was a very close set, but all the VFX artists at the time came to visit set and like, meet George, because George hadn't made anything in town in years. And, so it's well done. But if you're expecting like, oh yeah, let's hear what happened from the guy who killed the project or this, you're not going to get that. It's mostly fans and people who knew all of the online rumors that were happening for years about it. And they do some pretty fun recreations of some of the scenes from the script that was ultimately leaked. And I mean, yeah, the main point of it is we got robbed because George A. Romero would have done an extremely fateful adaptation to the comic book that would have been over the top and gory and horror, unlike the Paul W.S. Anderson movies, which were all action focused. But hey, Constantine, who had the rights to it, said we wanted action, not horror, which blows your mind when you think about that statement.
I actually read the original script and Romero's script. Actually, I did a script reading of it during lockdown. I got to read for Chris Redfield. And yeah, no, it would have been so interesting, especially, yeah, because like it was based on the original game, and we would have gotten a lot of practical effects monsters and it did tie together, and it did have a lot of Romero's kind of anti-corporatist message with the Umbrella Corporation. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's just unfortunate what could have been. Let's see, not technically a new release, but I did see that new IMAX restoration of David Fincher's Se7en in IMAX.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, no, it did look really good. I mean, I know and heard that there was some AI upscaling of it, but it does feel like it was one of those things where, it's like how Cameron used AI upscaling with some of his work, where I don't think it necessarily was just like AI generation, but with digital restoration, with like actual people working on it. But it looked and sounded amazing. Like it looked very fresh, and it actually been a long time since I rewatched Se7en, and I mean it's still a classic, it still holds up, and yeah, it's very very intense to see theatrically like that. Did any of you guys see it?
Not the new restoration.
Yeah, not the new one. Did the sloth guy scare you still? Had it been that long?
Um, I mean, yeah, definitely made me jump a little bit, like especially with the Dolby surround sound.
Speaking of AI Brad Pitt, uh, did you guys hear about that woman who got conned out of like $800,000 by an AI Brad
I
Pitt?
heard it was $1 million, and yeah, those photos
Oh,
look terrible.
they look terrible. How did that fool anybody? Yeah. Oh my
And
gosh.
people will fall for anything. But yeah, no,
Jeez.
it just looked like it, just like stock photos of Brad Pitt in a hospital bed, and that managed to convince her to shell out nearly $1 million.
It didn't even look like it didn't even look AI good. It looked like bad Photoshop.
Look like the Weekly World News is better Photoshop.
Yeah.
Hey,
That's
don't
what
drag my Weekly World News into
that's
this.
actually what it looked like though. Like they had like his face in a bandage. Oh my God, it's bad. Um, Real quick before we move on to our guest, have either of you guys started watching the Creep tapes on Shudder?
No, I haven't watched it.
I haven't seen anything creep.
I've only seen the first two episodes. You guys remember, the movie, the Creep movies with Mark Duplass.
Yeah.
These are kind of like little short, 20-minute. It's basically more of him tormenting people. Like one of them is like a filmmaker that he invites up to his, place to do a doc or to audition to do a movie with him. And of course, it's not really an audition. He brings the guy up there to, do bad things. Um, I've only gone through two episodes and I want to go through more of them, but these are short little, I mean, if you like Creep, this is basically more of that. And now let's bring in our special guest for the episode. This episode, we have director Mary Beth McAndrews promoting her new movie, Bystanders. How you doing, Mary Beth?
I'm so good. Thanks for having
Oh,
me.
thanks for being here. I always like to start with the origin story. How did you get started as a filmmaker?
My story is very funny because I never thought I was ever going to be a filmmaker, and I didn't really have much of a desire to be a filmmaker because it's very like I'm incredibly lucky. But anyway, I'll start from the beginning because I've been writing about movies. I went to college and was a film person, but like academic. I went and got my master's and wanted to get my PhD and wanted to teach because I thought, oh, I'm really good. I love writing. I love analysis. I love doing homework for fun. So I think that should be like my career path. And I always was kind of the mind that I wasn't creative enough, which is like the silliest thing ever. But like I just was like convinced that I didn't have what it took. And I don't think I really knew what it took. I just assumed I didn't have it. And so I just like loved being a film journalist. I still do. And I came to this job, and the job being I'm editor in chief of Dread Central, which is a horror publication. And in that hiring, I also was lucky enough to kind of be able to start helping with Epic Pictures and Dread, who Epic owns Dread Central. They are a distribution and production company. And so I started doing some help with them, especially with the ultra low budget horror stuff that's like sub 100K, weird stuff that's like a little bit out there, but like, cheap enough to kind of play around. And so I have been the Bystanders script I have been familiar with since I was in grad school in 2018. Jamie Alvey and I knew each other online as writers, and I was studying rape revenge films in grad school, actually. Like I wrote my master's thesis on rape revenge directed by women. And so when she said, I have this script that's a rape revenge movie, I said, I need to read it immediately. And so I read it, wanted to be involved with it, didn't know how, didn't know when, didn't know why, but I just like in my head knew I wanted to be a part of it. And so when I started working with Dread and I pitched this movie to them, I said, hey, this is an incredible, it's different than what we've done before, but I think it's really important. We can make it on a low budget. And after bothering them for a long time, they said, my boss, Patrick Ewald, said, yeah, okay, do you want to try to direct it? And I said, hey, what do you mean? I don't have experience. And he goes, I think you already, like, I was so lucky. He had like faith that I could jump in and try it. And he gave me that opportunity. And I would have been silly from my perspective, it would have been silly to say no to that opportunity. So I took it and I really loved it. So that's kind of that's the long story behind becoming a filmmaker. Surprise!
That kind of answers my next question too, was how did Bystanders come about? So you basically had known of the script for years,
Mhm.
and was Jamie actively trying to get it made and just stumbled onto you, or was it just one of those serendipitous things where you were like, I can get this made, like,
Yeah, so like I had known again, like Jamie and I had kind of known each other again, like we had both written for similar places, we'd interacted online, like we DM'd, and so I knew her there, and again, like she had posted about the script, and so I wanted to read it because I wanted to see what she was doing, and I think she was submitting it to a lot of screenwriting like like festivals for screenwriting competitions, was getting accolades on it, and she wanted to get it made, but she lives in Kentucky, and she doesn't have as many connections. Like unfortunately with filmmaking, it's all about the connections you have, and she didn't have as many, and I think she wanted to get it made but didn't know how, and neither did I. And then I got a connection that was like, hey, and so I said, let's grab this and see what we can do. So it was kind of like she was trying to get it made, didn't know how, no, and then luckily things kind of turned out the way they did.
Yeah. It all lines up sometimes, right? It's
yeah.
always that like
Yeah.
Takes
you
a
never
while
know.
sometimes, but it happens. Like it's one of those things where it's like filmmaking is a pain and it takes a long time, but if you it can also, it can go right. It just got to be patient, which is I know frustrating, but yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long journey. I saw on IMDb that it was inspired by the 2016 Brock case.
Yeah, so because she wrote it feeling angry about that in like the wake of that.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Wait, the 2016 which case?
Brock Turner.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's sad that it took that long, but also that it's still relevant. Not only
Yeah,
that
it's
case
and
and that feeling.
yeah, yeah. And this comes out the day after the inauguration. So,
Yeah.
Oh,
Fun times.
And
um,
also I wanted to ask, I think it's interesting that Jamie wrote and also stars in the movie, which I feel is particularly rare nowadays for films to have the writer also be the actor, but not the director. I was wondering how that came about.
so she had always envisioned herself as Claire, and she had like a lot of theater acting experience, and so I think it was kind of like part of the package deal that she really wanted to be Claire. And because we are a micro budget film, we were like, great, one less person to cast and one less person to have to pay. But also like she was so, she knew the character so well. So it worked out that way. But she was really connected with Claire and wanted to play her from like the very beginning of writing it. And so we just said, yeah, why? Yeah, of course. That makes sense.
did she have someone in mind for Gray as well? Because the chemistry between those two characters it's not only like there, in the movie, but it's also very important. So did she write? Because it sounds like she wrote that character with herself in mind. Did she write Gray with someone in mind as well?
So Garrett Murphy, who plays Gray, is absolutely incredible. And he was a find that we didn't just in casting. But she had written Gray with Oliver Jackson Cohen in mind, the guy from The Invisible Man. He plays
Oh,
the abusive boyfriend in The Invisible
Oh,
Man.
okay.
And
yeah.
then he's also in The Haunting of Hill House. He's one of the brothers. And so her goal was to get him to play that role. And again, micro budget indie feature. Unfortunately, that is not going to happen. But who we got with Garrett, like he took what Gray was on the page and made it so different, but like in the best way. He took the character and made him a little bit funnier and a little bit more lighthearted in a way that was unexpected, but I think really important for the tone of the movie. And I'm really glad he took it that direction. And yeah, Garrett was truly just like a find in the casting call. And he is incredible. So yeah.
Yeah, he and Claire and Gray together to me, because she has kind of a sense of humor about it as well. And We always say with movies like this, one of our favorite ways to put it is it becomes a different movie. And Bystanders, if you like go to the bathroom between the first and second act and come back, you're going to think you came into the wrong theater. It really is a completely different movie than it starts out as. And I think it's so much of it. I don't really want to spoil anything because I never watch trailers. So I knew nothing going into this. And I think that little where it turns on a dime there is so much fun because it really does. You're like, oh, okay, it's this kind of movie. Yeah. And I think that the characters of Claire and Gray, they kind of turn on a dime too, because you realize that, okay, there's this couple and they're in love and they got stuff going on. And then they turn into something else. Was it always the intention to make like, one of these, turns into a completely different movie? I mean, obviously the script is there, but the tone also changes.
Yeah, so as a person who has studied rape revenge movies, but also as a person who has been sexually assaulted, I really wanted to like this movie. The goal was to not have it be as dour as a lot of other rape revenge movies. I think, and that's not a bad, I think dour is not a bad thing, but I think a lot of the time with movies like Violation, Rose Plays Julie, a lot of these more recent women-directed rape revenge films, they're very serious for very good reason. And I think there is obviously a very important place for those films. I think what was great about Bystanders was we could play with tone a little bit more because it's a little bit more in like the revenge Coralie Farge's era of like a little bit more on the fantasy side. Again, less kind of like super fantasy, but we were edging a little bit towards that end. And so having the tonal change, I think makes this film feel different than like the usual like meditate. And we have a lot about like meditation on revenge and like trying to heal, but also at the same time makes it feel a little bit different and a little bit more kind of there's more joy, which sounds funny and like weird to say, but there is a little bit more joy to be had in some of these parts. And it also like kind of and having Claire and Gray like be the way they are, I think also puts that weird question in your head of like, they're technically doing bad things, but they're doing bad things to bad people. So there's like it helps trigger that question in your head of like, oh, like it's weird, like a kind of an interesting moral dilemma, like against what you're usually expecting. Again, I won't spoil too much about them, but yeah, there's definitely like that tonal balance there that I wanted to make this feel a little different than the usual like contemporary rape revenge movie without it falling into exploitation or without it becoming cheesy, because the last thing I want this movie to be is cheesy.
Yeah. And the tonal shift is fantastic because even their introduction to the other characters felt this very like, where is this going? Kind of uncomfortable. And then you mix that with Gray and Claire's very dry humor, which I really appreciate. I once I was like, oh, this is what's happening now. It was the dry humor was hitting, but like for a moment there, it was just like, I don't know what's happening. It was very uncomfortable, and I enjoyed that a lot. I like it when movies make me go like, I can't really tell what they're going. Oh, here we go. There's the payoff. All right, but
it's the best. Like, the shift, like when we were shooting that scene where like the big shift happens, I just had like a big smile on my face because like we go from, oh, they seem very like serious and scared to like, oh, the dynamics have shifted so hard. And like that was such a fun scene to shoot because Garrett and Jamie could really like reveal some stuff, like could really like give like a reveal, but like and in a really interesting way, and then kind of let people know, oh, this is going to go very differently than what I was expecting. So
yeah, what did it for me on that was when Gray was not at all fazed by four guys. And I think Claire said something like, he'll be fine. He's a lot meaner than he looks.
Yeah. He likes to fight.
Yeah, he likes to fight. I'm like, okay, this guy's either a badass or there's something else going on here. And it actually turned out to be both. But
yeah. And I also really like the dynamic between Claire and Gray with the frat killer guys, because the frat killer guys, well, like every scene they're in, they're just exuding toxic masculinity, and they're using slurs and name calling and all that, and they call Gray a soy boy, and they mock his masculinity, and he flips it around on them. So I thought that was an interesting way of contrasting them.
Yeah, and like that language, just so Jamie wrote a lot of that, like wrote a lot of language into the script, but we also played with it a little bit too, like outside of the script about using language that we hear, like all of us had heard. So like almost everyone on set was in their 20s. Like all of our actors were young, and almost every single person in our film, aside from a couple, this was like one of their first, if not their first feature. So there was a lot of like talking to them about it's okay to say this and like it's okay, like just like comfort. It's a hard place for a young guy to go as an actor, and so there was a lot of discussion about that, and also but wanting that language, well, it's harsh, it's stuff that I've been called, it's stuff that like I hear from guys, and it sounds like very rough, and it is, but that's because unfortunately that's the way a lot of gross guys have talked to me and friends in the past. So it's more realistic than I think some people want to admit when it comes to that language. But I also am happy because like my mom saw it and she was like, no one talks like that. I'm like, you don't know. And so it's been interesting to hear the responses to that language and feeling similarly to me in terms of like, oh yeah, like this is unfortunately familiar rhetoric. It is not it is shocking, but not like unrealistic to some people. So.
And you guys really play with catharsis a lot with it, and talking with about some of the characters like Claire and Gray, but also Abby, and the dynamic between them three is very interesting, because for a good portion of the film, you're seeing a bit of joy happening with some of this catharsis that Gray and Claire, but when it comes to Abby, there's a real protection that's happening there of like, well, you don't want to go there. And you're absolutely right. It's the language. It's rough to hear, but it's not. You look at a forum. It's a lot of what's been being said there, and they don't let up.
I dated a guy in a frat, and talked like that when I was around. So like.
Imagine what he says outside of that.
Exactly.
I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was thinking about this. I'm like, this is the way my ex, who was a terrible person, spoke with his guy friends all the time about women. Like it's like it is what it is, and it's fucked. But
and yeah, no, actually, weirdly enough, today I read an article in the Financial Times about it was like anonymous interviews with business people about like has business gone MAGA, and they did interviews with like anonymous bankers like, oh boy, I get to say all these slurs now and I won't get canceled. So yeah, no, it's spot on, sadly.
Well, it's something also that the actors, they kind of, was there any hesitation with the male, frat boy type actors? Because the thing is, if you play that role right, people won't be able to separate the actor from the character, and they end up hating, like, for example, the actor Harold Perrineau, however you say his name, he was in Lost, and he was in this great show called Wedding Band, where he was in a wedding band. But I cannot look at him the same after Sons of Anarchy, because he was such a bastard in Sons of Anarchy that whenever I see his...
No, he was in Sons of Anarchy. I love him in From. Have you watched From?
Oh no!
Oh yeah, I've been watching From. That was really good.
Did you watch Sons of Anarchy?
I watched some of it, but not a lot of it. So I didn't get, but like I didn't realize that he was in it and was like a bastard.
Oh, he is a terrible character. He did such a great job at playing this horrible person that whenever I see him now, I'm like, I just can't separate.
Yeah.
I don't know that this applied, but I mean, it's something that I think actors have to be careful with. You don't want to play it too well, because then people start thinking, like the guy who played Cody, people or the other fellow who is actually kind of the ringleader. If they play that too well, people they could end up pigeonholing themselves.
I mean,
That
that
was
was
never,
me.
that was like never really a concern. I think because they all were starting out, and I think they were all really excited to get roles that weren't like background characters or like something. I think because this was a challenge for a lot of them, I think they were really excited. And I think one of the big things that was really important to me on this set was making sure everyone felt safe to like as much as I could because the first day I had everyone that was on set gather around and be like, look, I was a sexual assault survivor and this means a lot to me. And so I want everyone here to feel as safe as possible. Like, I want you to be able to come to me or our producer, Jeff Se7en, who is incredible. Like, if you have something you're uncomfortable with, if you are feeling any kind of way about anything, like, tell us. It will never be a problem. Like, this is a very intense film. We are asking you to do some very intense things. We are asking you to say some very intense things. So we want to make sure everyone feels okay with that. And if you don't feel okay with it, we need to talk it through because like this is your this is our movie together, and I don't want anyone to feel like they were forced to do something they didn't want to do. And I think setting that tone was really helpful because I really wanted to like let the boys know, like, yes, we're putting the women and the female characters through a lot. We're also putting the actors through a lot, the male actors, and so there was a lot of trying to like make sure everyone felt taken care of, not just the women, which was like a big curveball for me as a director. I hadn't thought about that really at first. My producer was like, "We need to make sure the boys." I'm like, "Oh my God, how the hell? Like, why didn't I think about this?" Was in pre-production, like when we were before everyone got on set. And I'm so glad he pointed that out. I'm sure I would have come to it eventually, but like it was helpful to have him say that because it's really easy for people to be like they're terrible. And I'm like, no, their characters are terrible. These are very, very sweet, kind human beings that like would hang out when they didn't even have to be on set with us and like would have like hang out during like we had one day where like you can come over if you want, like to where we're staying and like have dinner. And everyone came over and hung out till like 2 a.m. Like we were all very close because it was such a tiny crew. The cabin where we filmed everything, I lived there for 3 weeks with Jamie and our producers. Like that was our home on top of our filming location. So like everyone still came over. Like even though we filmed in that fucking cabin for 2 weeks, they still wanted to come over and hang out. And so I think it was the vibe we curated on set that made everyone feel comfortable into getting into these characters. And like they were also excited. A lot of them were excited to die like, on camera and have like this experience to like have bloody deaths on camera. And like honestly, I get it. So like they were excited to have these moments to play villains and also have these like spectacular deaths because there's a lot of deaths, but there's a small cast. So like every death is kind of like a set piece. So it was exciting for everyone to be a part of it. Did I answer your question?
It's always interesting how forward actors can be when it comes to deaths and stuff. I made a short years ago where we had a drowning scene and I was in it as well. And so I'm like co-directing and we're drowning her. And like there was a point where I was like, all right, stop. Are you okay? Are you okay? She's like, yeah, it's called acting. I'm having a blast. I was like,
Yep.
Like,
We had a similar sequence where we were like, stop. And he's like, why did you stop? And I'm like, what? Like, I'm not trying to actually kill a man here. And like, we had like, the guy does his own stunts a lot of the times. And I can go longer. I'm like, we don't have enough people here to like safely make sure of that. So like, I'm so sorry, but like, I can't listen to you. Like, I can't be responsible for anything that happens. Like, I don't want you to get hurt.
We got it. You did great.
Yeah, we'll edit it. We'll make it look longer. In the editing, it'll be fine. Like, it's fine.
And another thing that I noticed, and you kind of touched on it, is the actual sexual assault scenes was done. The phrase I want to use is tastefully, even though it's not tasteful.
Yeah.
But it's not like I spit on your grave, where it's one of those things where you're like, "Oh, stop already!
No,
stop
baby.
already!" It basically because these girls get roofied, and you show it from their point of view. We're like, okay, we're fading out and then we're fading back in, and then exposition tells you what happened. Was that, I mean, I think you answered the question with your fuck no on the I spit on your grave. Was that a conscious decision to give basically to do it through exposition and not actually showing it.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I I do believe like that there is like there is a way to show rape on screen and in film. I do not believe that it should be avoided. I know that there are a lot of people who say that we shouldn't be showing these kinds of things in television or in film. I disagree with that. I think that's ignoring the reality that a lot of people face. But I also think that it needs to be used the right way. I think a lot of the time scenes of rape and sexual assault are used as some kind of like character development thing in a way that is like, oh, look, she's been tarnished and she's strong regardless. And I think that makes me want to fucking throw up. And I also think that it's like such a spectacle of like, look at this horrifically violent thing happening to this woman you love and who seems pure. And I just think it's so exploitative. And I think it's playing with the audience emotions in a way that I think is incredibly manipulative. And so there are some rape revenge movies like Revenge where you see it happen, but it's done in a very particular way that it's not prolonged. But for this film, we didn't want like Jamie hadn't really written it in there, and I did not want to show it at all. I think there's the whole basically like the approach was no violence towards women, only violence towards men. We are flipping the script of what you expect from horror. This is not going to be a movie where you see a woman's body in distress and destruction the whole time. It's actually going to be the male body that is in distress and destruction and running through the woods and trying to escape the whole time. So the whole idea was to flip that expectation while also avoiding these exploitative tropes that are so common in this genre and using sound design and using that Gaussian blurry kind of stuff to put us in Abby's shoes that is just as horrific. I think the sound design and what we show is just as horrific without having to focus on her pain and her struggling and her losing that bodily autonomy. We do that enough in the next sequence when they're tied up in the backyard. So I think we do enough to kind of get that message across without showing explicitly what they do.
It's actually more horrific because what the audience imagines is going to be worse than what you could show anyway. So instead of being exploitational, it's more creative almost. And it's almost more horrific to not to do it how you did it.
Yeah. And that was a close set. That was like even though that was Brandy's first day on set. Sorry, Brandy.
Wow.
And we had
Rough
a close
first day.
I know. And we talked about it. Like, are you okay with this? And she was okay with it. But it was a closed set. We only had me in the room with our cinematographer and with Brandy, and we just tried to get that done as quickly, but as well as good as possible, but as quickly, so we didn't have to like linger in that headspace. And yeah, that was a hard one to shoot, but Brandy was amazing in terms of her willingness, and also our cinematographer Chance Madison was amazing in terms of understanding exactly how we wanted to portray this. And it was a really difficult but like great process with great people.
Sets the tone for the catharsis later, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
my
yes,
God,
yes.
I know.
Absolutely. Okay, well, what else do you have anything coming up that you want to plug before we go?
So I have a podcast called Scarred for Life where my co-host and I interview a guest about the movie that terrified them as a kid. So if you are interested in that, I have
Nice.
a book coming out. I don't know when yet, but it's on the movie Paranormal Activity. It's a monograph about paranormal activity
cool.
and why it is one of the best movies of the horror history. So that is
Awesome.
coming out soon. And yeah, that's what I can talk about. But I'm all over social media, and Dread Central is awesome if you ever want to follow us to see what we're doing. So
That was actually my next question. Where can people find you on the socials to follow, to see what you have coming up next and to find out about this book and all this other stuff that you have coming up?
yeah, so every social media platform seems to be a dumpster fire right now, but I am still on a lot of them because I
That's
don't
true.
know where to go at this point. Like everyone is terrible. So I am kind of on X still and Blue Sky at MB McAndrews. And then I'm on Instagram for now, I guess, at MB.McAndrews. So you can find me there talking about this movie ad nauseum for for the foreseeable future.
Hell yeah.
Mhm.
And has anyone talked about Ghost on Scarred for Life yet?
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh my God. Yes.
Because that was
They
my
have.
whenever someone's like,
Oh,
"What's the
yeah.
scary? You're a horror fan. What's the scariest movie you've ever seen?" I'm like, "Ghost." They're like, "Patrick Swayze." I'm like, "Yeah." When
The
you're
one
when
with the
you're
sexy pottery scene, and you're like,
listen,
that's the one. There's more to it than that.
when you're a child with ADHD at a Catholic school, being told you're going to hell all the time,
Oh,
and then
geez.
you see shadows dragging people into hell. Yeah, it does
Oh
that.
God, that Catholic school shit will really do a number on you, huh?
Yeah, Sister Mary, she did a number.
Did you have nuns? Did you have a nun?
We had nuns.
You had nuns?
We had
Oh
little
shit.
nuns.
I thought
None of that
oh,
business.
Man. A
No.
I think my childhood scarring movie, and it wasn't even the movie, was Magic. And it wasn't the movie, it was the
the
commercial.
trailer. Yeah.
The TV
I think
commercial.
the concept of
yeah.
magic.
Yeah.
The concept of
No.
magic was scary.
It-
The commercials, yeah.
the commercial, the magic
Oh.
is it. We
Yeah.
are dead.
We
Yeah,
are
that-
dead.
Yeah, that I've seen that, and that would definitely scar a child. For me, mine would probably be the Scooby-Doo project because it was the height of Blair Witch fever, and I was too young to actually see the Blair Witch Project, so I saw the Scooby-Doo parody of the Blair Witch Project, which was still pretty scary because it's about the Scooby-Doo gang lost in the woods and getting chased down.
It's so
Okay,
good though.
do you want to hear something funny? Okay, one, love that. Two, Casper Solomon, I think, who did the Adult Swim Yule log, he
Yeah.
did the fucking Scooby-Doo project.
No
So when
way.
I interviewed him for the Adult Yule log, I was like, hey, fuck the Yule log. Tell me about the Scooby-Doo project. And he was like, I haven't had someone ask me about that in forever. And I was like, well, I'm here to talk about it because I don't
Get
care about
comfortable.
anything else. And he was like, fuck yeah.
Oh
So
boy, I gotta listen to that episode.
For the listeners, we who can't see this, we've been staring at Mary Beth's Blair Witch tattoo this entire interview. So it doesn't surprise us that the Scooby-Doo project is one of her favorites.
hell yeah. I'm from Maryland. I live 40 minutes from Burkittsville. Like where I live now, I live close to Burkittsville. So that's so cool.
I've gone on you were saying Paranormal Activity is the best movie ever made. Well, I don't think Paranormal Activity would be a thing if it wasn't for the Blair Witch Project.
No,
because-
Oh no, I don't you worry. Like there's a lot of me writing about that. Like the thing is, Blair Witch Project has so many books and stuff written on it already about like why it's so important. And but Paranormal Activity was the one that actually brought like we wouldn't have Paranormal Activity without Blair Witch, but then Paranormal Activity and Cloverfield. You're getting me on a fucking like rant here of like all of my research for months. But
we're
like,
gonna have to have you
yeah.
back on to talk about this
I know.
when the book comes out.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't think there will ever be another Blair Witch Project because at the
No.
time the internet was in its infancy, and you can't fool people like that anymore, especially because found footage movies are a dime a dozen, and I'm a sucker for them, but 95% of them are horrible. But you have to sift through the bad to find the Paranormal Activities, to find the Mungo Lakes, to find the good ones.
Lake Mungo.
Lake Mungo. I always mess that up.
Excuse me. Well, and I think, well, that's the thing with the found footage. The found footage boom of that era was massive, and I think that people started not liking found footage because there was so much of it. But now I think we're in a new era of found footage. I'm not saying there's not a lot of bad stuff out there, but there's been like, I mean, again, I'm a found footage freak. I go to the Unnamed Footage Festival, which is San Francisco's found footage festival every year. It's like the coolest thing ever. And I just think it's such a great technique for people to experiment. And some of the coolest stuff I've ever seen is found footage. And some of the worst things I've ever seen are found footage, Like it's a beautiful spectrum. It's a beautiful spectrum.
If you can actually be creative with it, which I think is what Paranormal Activity did, then like you said, it's real good. But the thing is, it's so cheap, and that's why there's so much of it.
Oh, and that always bums me out because like I really want to make a found footage movie next. Like I have ideas, I really want to make a found footage movie, but then a lot of the times, and this is not hate, but like directors will say, "Oh, I just made found footage because it was cheap," and I was like, And like, I get it. I get it. I don't disparage anyone for that, but I just at the same time, I'm like, but don't you guys like it a little bit? Isn't it kind of cool to get to play with format? And they're like, it sucked. And I was like, shit. Well, fine.
I think you're right, though. I think that there's a new resurgence in found footage. I mean, that I think COVID kind of brought out like movies like Host, which I loved, the way that Host did it. I think that people are finding more creative ways to do it. But so,
as technology marches on.
Yep. Well, Mary Beth, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Everybody, on the day that this posts, Bystanders will be available on VOD the next day, on the 21st of January. If you listen to this late, then you'll be able to go right from this podcast to Bystanders. And everybody watch Bystanders and take the advice I give about every movie. Don't watch a trailer. Go right in blind, because you're going to just have a blast with it. And Mary Beth, thank you. We hope that we were talking before we hit record. We hope that the VOD goes well enough for the other things that you have planned to come to fruition. And that's going to be awesome.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. and yeah, come back on when you have your Paranormal Activity book out, because we almost got off on a tangent, and we'll talk about
I would love to, honestly.
Awesome.
I'll email you and be like, hey, you guys want to have me just like sit on your podcast and talk on a soapbox for an hour?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Those are the best interviews. So yeah, everybody see Bystanders. And as for us, you can find us on all of the socials at Ion Horror, all the socials except one, as Ion Horror, or you can go to iHorror.com, which is the site we all call home. Our theme song is by Restless Spirit, so go check them out. And our artwork is by Chris Fisher, so go check him out. And everybody check out Bystanders. And we will see you in a couple of weeks. So for me, James J. Edwards.
I'm Jacob Davison.
I'm Jonathan Correa.
And I am Mary Beth McAndrews.
Keep your eye on horror.